Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Bainbridge, and I want to welcome you to Book Passage's virtual author event today. I have the privilege of getting to do several things that I love at Book Passage. I host author events as I'm doing now. I get to sell books to customers, and I also have the pleasure of getting to put together book displays at our store. This time of year, we have a great display of summer reads. And of course, summer reads can be different for everybody. But we have so many customers that come in and say they're looking for something light, not too heavy, but something that they can really get into that has a great plot, etc. Um, and so Maribelle's Shadow, the book at the center of our conversation today, is one of those books that is perfect for a summer read. Susannah Marren, a nationally renowned observer of women's relationships, has written a compelling tale of deception and family loyalty. As the editorial director of Palm Beach Confidential, Maribelle Walker knows what lurks beneath the glittering facade of the moneyed elite on Florida's most glamorous coast, or does she? Susannah is the author of 17 books between The Tides, A Palm Beach Wife, A Palm Beach Scandal, and the pseudonym for Susan Shapiro Barish, who has written over a dozen nonfiction books. For her nonfiction, she's been featured in many publications, such as the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. She's also been featured on many television shows, including Today's Show and Good Morning America. For over 20 years, she's taught gender studies at Marymount Manhattan College and has guest taught creative nonfiction at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College. Right now, she's teaching at the Westport Writers Workshop. So we want to welcome Susannah.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. I love your bookstore. Whenever I'm in San Francisco, in your area, I always go there. Truly special.
Well, much. So I'm going to get into some questions here so we can get to know a little bit more about the book. At the center of the novel is Maribelle, widowed within the first 15 pages, so it's not a spoiler alert. The fallout of her husband's death spins the Barrows family in unpredictable ways. What motivated you to choose this plot, and where did the original idea come from?
So this book has been with me for decades. I had written a nonfiction book years ago, a study on sisters called Sisters Devoted or Divided. And I just could not believe the stories that, for my nonfiction, I always interview a very diverse group of women in terms of race, level of education, ethnicity, religion, area of the country, earning power, all different ages. And I kept hearing how really fraught it could be with sisters. And then I'm always intrigued with what is loyalty, what is betrayal, and what are family secrets. So this book, actually, the story of Maribelle, who is the eldest, she's late 30s. She has a sister, Caroline, who's only 2 years younger. And then her little sister, Raleigh, who's a chunk younger. She's almost 10 years younger. So how does the family system work? And then, of course, the mother, because I've done a study on mothers and daughters and a female rivalry, Tripping the Prom Queen. I was at your store for that years ago. And so I was really looking at what can happen in a family, especially in a society like Palm Beach, where appearance is everything versus the truth.
Yeah. Do you yourself have sisters?
I don't, but I have 2 daughters and a son. And my mother was the youngest of 3 sisters, and I just could not believe the drama in that family.
Yeah.
And I've always been interested in how women who are very close to their sisters don't need as many female friends. And how, if you're not getting along with your sister, your female friends have to be a sister substitute. And that's all my nonfiction research. So in this book, I really wanted Samuel's death, Maribel's handsome, supposedly wonderful husband, but was he? That's part of the mystery.
Yeah.
I wanted his death to really be the inciting incident for the truth about this family.
Interesting. There was a show on TV, a show from Ireland or Scotland, I believe, about four sisters. I can't remember what it's called, but it was kind of like this about the relationship of the sisters and how fraught it could be. But
and how, because this story really uncovers a deep secret, what do we owe ourselves and what do we owe our sisters or our mothers? And then another thing that really interested me in writing this book was the role of wife, because I've done 3 different studies on the role of wife for my nonfiction. And so everyone is married. Maribelle's a sister without children. And the other sisters have little children, Raleigh and Caroline. But the mother, Lucinda, their mother, is so bossy and has a certain vision. So I wanted to look at that family dynamic too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting to think about. Once I have 2 daughters, they're not married. So we've talked about the idea of once they marry and there's a husband into the picture, how it changes the dynamics of the whole family.
It's such a triangle.
Yeah.
I had actually done a study on mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law.
Uh-huh.
And that's
Yeah.
a whole dicey situation.
Interesting. So you've written 13 nonfiction books, as we've mentioned. This is your 4th novel. Can you tell us what it's like to write both forms? Do you have different processes for the different genres? It must be interesting to be able to go back and forth.
Right now, I'm writing a nonfiction book that's due soon, and another Palm Beach novel.
Oh.
So, they're both writing, obviously, but they are such different genres, and you really feel it. For a nonfiction book, I start out with a premise. For instance, I mentioned the book on mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law. I knew that that was very loaded. I myself needed that book when I was a very young married woman, and I couldn't find it. And the late, great Toni Morrison once said, I'll paraphrase, if there's a book that you need and you can't find it, you should write it. So that study was really interesting. And I wanted to know in these situations how much, you're right, how much the husband coming in really changes everything.
Yeah.
And what it does to, if there are 3 sisters and they have very different husbands, and that's part of this story, what happens to the sisters?
Yeah, definitely. So, do you have a preference for nonfiction over fiction, or is it just you get an idea for a novel and that's what happens next? It's because it sounds like your nonfiction has the similar thread, obviously, of women relationships between women and different types, sisters, mothers-in-law, etc. So I'm just curious if you prefer one to another.
Oh, right. So it's not that I prefer one to another, and that I guess I didn't finish the answer. It's that it's such a different experience. So the premise is, for example, with mothers-in-law, that the mother-in-law today really hopes for a healthy relationship, and that the daughter-in-law today, especially if they're little children or grandchildren, and the daughter-in-law today says, I married you, I did not marry your family. So there's kind of very contemporary shakeup in how it plays out. I kind of knew that when I started the book. And then I interviewed that disparate group of women and come up with a conclusion. And so I love that form. There's lots of research. There's serious research. I look at pop culture. I interview experts, therapists, social workers. With a novel, so I'm really busy. I have a stack of books and treatises printed out to look at. But when it comes to a novel, it's just like a movie in my head. And I'm alone in the room and the desk is very clear and I'm writing it. The only thing I do, and I've been on enough panels with some really well-known authors to be impressed by their answer to this question. Do you know the whole story for your novel before you begin? Right. Because I come out of the nonfiction world where everything is organized and I know what the chapters will be before I do the research and support my thesis, I write out the whole outline for a novel too.
Interesting. So yeah, because So yeah, some writers talk about how the characters lay this themselves out and they don't always know when they first start what's going to happen and how the end's going to be. So that's interesting that that might be how your nonfiction writing affects your novel writing.
I admire writers who say that. Like I said, I've met them, I've been with them at, festivals. It's
Right.
so great. I think that I control it or work it differently. I know the very beginning. I
Mm-hmm.
knew that Samuel would die within the first chapter
Uh-huh.
of this novel, and I knew the last scene. And then for me, it's threading the action, the plot, and of course the theme to
Mm-hmm.
get to that end. But for all my fiction, I know the very beginning and the very end.
Interesting. Huh. Did you always want to be a writer? Did you, when you first, were in college and looking at what you were going to do, did you think of yourself as wanting to be an author?
Always.
Ah.
When I was very young, say 6 or 7, I was writing newspapers and trying to sell them to my father and my uncle. And handwritten little newspapers about the families, my
Oh,
uncle's family, our family. Yes, I always knew there was no equivocating. I loved teaching. I taught until COVID at
uh-huh.
Mary for 23 years. And as you said, it guest taught at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. Just
Yeah.
love students of every age, love the teaching experience. But I was teaching writing. So
Yeah.
it's all looped in. It's always
Right.
about writing.
Yeah. Wow. Um, so this is your third novel set in Palm Beach. And so I want to know why Palm Beach and how do you know it so well? Before we started, you told me you're calling us from Greenwich, Connecticut, which is such a gorgeous place. And I think people think of it being common to go on vacation from the East Coast down to Florida, that's pretty popular. And I'm curious if that's how it started for you.
Well, actually, Palm Beach is an interesting trajectory. So when my older brother and I were very little, like I was a toddler, my parents were invited to Palm Beach before that whole strip on the ocean because
Mm-hmm.
it's Barrier Island. It's about 18 miles long
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of miles wide, maybe at the widest. So and then there's this long narrow strip. So that's part of the island. So my parents were invited by a friend to come for Christmas break, and they just fell in love with it. And my father was for decades, a ranked amateur tennis player.
Oh.
So my mother, who came from Brooklyn before it was cool, had never seen anything. And this, we were from the Jersey Shore, not Greenwich. But my mother had never seen anything like these coiffed ladies in Palm Beach. And then, like the day I graduated high school, my parents became residents.
Oh.
And so, but even before that, my whole life, every Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter break, and then other long weekends, and then for as an adult, and then with my children, always Palm Beach. And here's why I wrote the novel and why I wrote it in Palm Beach. So Palm Beach, we know, is rarefied, beautiful, privileged, moneyed. We know all that. But what struck me as a gender professor was that my mother and her friends, all those years that she was like in her 30s when she got there, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 onward, they all seemed to have so much confidence. And it was almost anti-ageism. And in the Northeast, like in New York, where I taught at Marymount, women become invisible
Mm-hmm.
by the time they're 60,
Mm-hmm.
on a good day. And I really, as my life's work is on women having voice and how they're positioned in society. So my nonfiction really fuels the fiction. And I wanted Lucinda, the mother of Maribelle, Caroline, and Raleigh, I wanted her to have so much power, and her friends do too. So it's a multi-generational story. And I'm really looking at a place where tons of secrets. I had done a whole nonfiction study on why women keep secrets and lie for the cause.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I took that research, and women are so facile at it because they have to be. We live in a world of male supremacy. How
Mm-hmm.
could, in fact, one of the women said to me at a book signing for my book on why women lie for the, have secrets and lie for the cause. She said to me, how could you write this book? Of course we lie. How else would we get through? So that's definitely applicable. And in a place like Palm Beach, you're measured, women measure each other and judge each other. So I really wanted to emphasize that in the novels, the Palm Beach novels.
It's so interesting. It seems like this is a different culture I'm not familiar with. I'm familiar by reading about Palm Beach, but not the experience of it. So,
well, Allison, what's so interesting about Palm Beach is it's a microcosm, it's a society. There's lots of hierarchy, but there is everywhere.
Yes.
And when I wrote Tripping the Prom Queen, The Truth About Women in Rivalry, I interviewed women in South Florida, not Palm Beach, but women in a tennis league. And the same day I interviewed women, the head of that group of tennis players, and then a woman who was in charge of a bowling league in like Milwaukee. Their complaints, observances, and experiences were so similar.
Wow.
So what we're talking about with women in contemporary American society, in my opinion, based on my research and writing, is what we long for.
Mm-hmm.
The glittering prizes, of which there are many in Palm Beach, right? We live in a capitalistic society, so there's money, but what do women really want? We want, as I said, the glittering prizes. So that would be beauty, success, husbands for many women, children for many women, not everyone, but a material life and everything to go as we expect it to, and including our relationships. In reality, as I said, I've talked to such a diverse group of women, whether you finished high school or you have an MBA from Harvard, if you're unhappy with your husband, if you have a troubling daughter or granddaughter, if you are feeling like you're mistreated at work, in another hierarchy altogether, how women are in the workplace, it really doesn't matter your level of education or earning power or how big your home is. These are the yearnings of women, and those are actually universal.
Yeah, it's very interesting. As you're talking, I'm thinking about, for instance, my daughter's in their 20s. I don't know how old your children are, but they seem different. They don't seem quite as materialistic. They don't seem like they want, the house and in the suburbs and just a lot of the things that our generations before us wanted. And I wondered if you see some of the same things. I mean, of course, I'm sure there's some, but that there is a difference with this younger generation.
It's totally a pendulum swinging. I agree with you. And as I said, I've done a few studies on the role of wife in America. And when I did my study on The New Wife, that was really my most serious book. It's called The New Wife, The Evolving Role of the American Wife. The millennial women with whom I spoke were reporting that they would rather be like their grandmothers who didn't work than their mothers who worked, hit a glass ceiling, and half of them got divorced.
Wow,
So
interesting.
really looking at it very differently and having a very different approach to their parenting too, for young mothers today. It's definitely a reaction to what they experience.
Yeah. Well, I can see the way you're talking about a lot of the research you've done for your nonfiction, how it could make for really interesting stories for your fiction. So how it could inform it. So social ambition, money, reputation, these matter greatly to the character in the book, Lucinda, as the matriarch. You've talked a little bit about her, yet she comes from humble beginnings and has worked hard to be accepted. Do you think she reflects the way many women feel?
I really do. I think she's lucky. She's fortunate because her dream was put into play and into a reality. There's so many of us who dream, so I don't think that women are confused a lot of the time about what they want, but the path is trickier. And actually for Lucinda, who has come from the Panhandle, and who knows what happened in the Panhandle. So here Lucinda is, and everyone in Palm Beach says, oh, that Barrows family, so nouveau riche. And what did they really do back in the Panhandle? Again, lots of judgments. But Lucinda, in a town where money and beauty work. She and her
Yeah.
daughters do well, and they
Yeah.
all have great jobs, and they're really listening to their mother. She's imperious. She really tells them this is how it will be. But Lucinda is a widow, and now
Mhm.
Maribel is a widow, and she's remarried already. But her husband, this was fun for me. He's just arm candy.
That's great. I mean, so often in the past, there's been books about men and their arm candy. So I think it's fun to have women get a little of that.
Why
So,
I did it. So William fills a chair and
yeah,
looks good, and he
there
fits
you
in.
go.
But
Yeah.
when we talked about what women yearn for and what they long for, what I
Mhm.
have found in my research for every one of the nonfiction books is this longing for women, longing for success, longing for happy friendships, female friendships.
Mhm.
Women love groups, they want to belong. In Palm Beach, there's a lot of country club life. So
Mhm.
I have two country clubs, fictive, of course, but in Palm Beach, in
Yeah.
this novel, in Maribel's Shadow, that, where there are some scenes there. And we see how women don't always support each other. And of
Uh-huh.
course, I'm hoping that they will. That's,
Yeah.
it's worth
Yeah. That competitive thing, I think that I
very
find,
real.
being over 60 myself, I find it interesting how, for me, my relationships, my friendships with other women have become so invaluable and important. And I think we've lost a lot of that sort of competitive edge as we get older, that we're more supportive for each other. I don't know.
I hope that that's the case, and that's certainly the goal.
Mm-hmm.
But I have found in my research that it doesn't always hold up. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I interviewed, I'm working on this new project now, as I told you. I interviewed women about a month ago, a group of women who belong to an organization. And when I said, is it competitive?
Mm-hmm.
No one really wanted to say. And then finally someone said, you mean because we're over 60? What you just said? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's still competitive. So it
Uh,
depends, but we're searching
yeah.
for a very reliable, honorable group of friends.
Yes.
It's very important. That's the
Right.
goal.
That's the goal. I suppose, though, if you really look into it, there probably is a lot of that underlying competitive spirit that maybe is hard to lose because you have it for so long.
And
It's
it's
very,
because it's societally prescribed.
yeah.
Women are, I mean, if we even look at, say, corporate America
Mm,
or a big law firm, tokenism,
yeah.
where we'll bring one woman in, and if we're bringing more, then you can only compete for the spot for the female. So,
Yeah.
it's still a patriarchy. But I did want to say one thing about this book, and that is that um, because I had written a book many years ago called Reclaiming Ourselves, about
Mhm.
how we wake up in times of great joy or times of great sorrow and really reinvent ourselves and have deeper understanding of
Mhm.
who we are and who the people are around us. And for Maribel, that's totally true. But and again, no spoiler, but as we peel the onion on what Samuel did and who he really was,
Mhm.
Maribel, and I think this is true of women as wives, Maribel has to ask herself, well, who am I to have not known this? Or
Mhm.
did I lie to myself?
Mhm.
And who am I to have married him? And I
Yeah.
think women, that happens with us.
Very interesting. Something I've found lately has come up in conversation as friends of mine, like, get divorced, separate from their husbands of many years because the kids are gone, and all of a sudden they say, "I want more from my life." It's just interesting to watch these women sort of look back and think, okay, I've grown, I've changed, or I want to grow and I want to change and become someone different as they become older. And I guess I wonder if women are looking at that at a younger age nowadays because we've tried to teach to them, we've tried to empower them and that sort of thing.
We really do as mothers. I did a whole study on mothers and daughters called You're Grounded Forever, but first let's go shopping, where I interviewed mothers of 3-year-olds to 30-year-olds.
Uh-huh.
Why do we make more excuses for our daughters? Why do we protect them? What is the truth that we tell them about our own experiences with men in the workplace?
Uh-huh.
You know, what is fat talk with mothers and daughters? What is materialism? I looked at the 10 issues and I really applied it to this book. And I think that we try very hard to protect our daughters.
Yeah.
And so age, longevity, ageism, of course, is an issue, but longevity being what it is, I think you're right, that women by 30 or 40 are saying, wait a second, how will my future play out? Which generation might or might not have been awake on. And what are my goals? And longevity is why women are still competitive. I mean, you 65 years old and acting like you're 45 because of all the years of female competition. Or you could say, as you said with your friends, enough, let's get this right. So lots of stuff in play for women.
Yeah. So if this book were to hit the big screen, because it seems like I can picture it already. I'm thinking who's going to play the parts. Who do you think would play Maribelle, Caroline, and Raleigh and Lucinda?
So this book has been optioned, although one never knows. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'll know more in a month or two. Well, I know they're very big stars at this point, but as I was writing it, I always try to imagine the actor.
Okay.
So I think that Emily Blunt would be great for Maribel. I think Anne Hathaway would be great for Caroline. By the way, she's, as the middle sister, she's the pleaser. And there's a price for another favorite theme of mine, the price we pay for being the good girl.
Right.
And then Raleigh is so much dreamier. You'll see. Wait till you see this Raleigh story. And so I don't know, maybe like Emma Watson or, someone in here. And then for Lucinda, well, remember, Lucinda gave birth in the Panhandle to Maribel when she was like 19. She did go to college after. Yay, Lucinda. But she could be, I don't know, Mary Louise Parker.
Oh, interesting.
She'd be good, right? That would work.
I like that. Are you going to get to have much to do with it? Do you know?
I don't know yet. I was in LA a few months ago and met with one of the producers, and that was really exciting. But let me just put it this way. Some of my books have been optioned before, so I'm just crossing fingers and praying.
Okay, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for that as well. So you have a very eclectic cast in your novel. Is there one character that you with the most, and is there a character that you would like to be more alike or less alike?
I think that I identify with Maribel. She really does, and I mentioned before family systems, as the eldest of three, she really does strive to please her mother and to do the right thing. And she epitomizes another one of my favorite themes for women in our society, which is she puts one foot in front of the other. She has a great job, as you said, as editorial director of Palm Beach Confidential. But does that mean that the reward always comes? No. There are real surprises for us all. Look at Maribel. Samuel, her handsome young husband, is gone. So I identify with her desire to succeed and to be the good girl and the good daughter and the good big sister. And my youngest child, my second daughter, has said to me, because she writes, has said to me over different times with writing and sharing notes, she'll say, Mom, you don't always have to have a character you like. And Lucinda is pretty dicey and Machiavellian. And so she's fun. And then, of course, she has, her own secrets. So I really loved writing her, but I don't know what to say about it. I don't want to judge her.
Yeah.
But she's tricky.
It's so interesting. I always think about that as when an author writes a character that you don't like, how that would seem really difficult to to fully evolve that character without wanting to fix it.
because this goes back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, because I have an outline and I have copious notes on each character
Mm-hmm.
before I even start the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I hope it becomes apparent to the reader, we understand Lucinda, we forgive her.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't mean she always does the best thing for
Right.
her daughter.
Do you do a lot of research for your novels, or is it like you said, you just sit down and it comes to you and
No, I definitely research, and I interviewed a lot of people in Palm Beach because when maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when I pitched the idea of the Palm Beach novels to
mm-hmm.
before, we had a president who has a home in Palm Beach and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
When I pitched it to St. Martin's, I was to my editor and the publisher, I talked about what we talked about, the layers of being in a beautiful place. If money is the object in a capitalistic society, is everything okay? No, women really still endure and survive and have secrets and have, things that they have to really manage that are almost threatening. And we talked about it. So I always knew that Palm Beach would be almost a character in this novel. And then, even though I knew it so well based on my parents living there, I felt I had to interview. So I interviewed a lot of people and did a lot of research,
Okay.
including, Henry Flagler, right?
Oh,
Because Flagler's the one, and went to the Flagler Museum. That
yeah.
was a mansion called Whitehall, and really, did the whole, I dug deep. I like
Yeah.
that.
That's great. I mean, that would be a fun place to research if you're writing a book about somewhere, some small town in the Midwest or something. Might not be quite as fun to research, although you never know. I'm sure there's, like you said, the same kind of things going on everywhere.
I think that what's so interesting about Palm Beach is that everyone lives by the season.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that you get there in November and you leave in May. And
Mm-hmm.
the implication would be that you shouldn't stay any longer and you shouldn't get there any earlier. Lots of rules and expectations. And that actually was begun by Flagler and
Mm-hmm.
his last before he, Mary Lily.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's definitely a place unto itself in terms of rules and societal expectations.
Right, right. I mean, there's also the whole idea, it sounds like it might come up in this book, and it comes up so often in novels, is, money can't buy you happiness. I mean, it's a cliche, but I wonder how that figures into your story.
It totally does. Money is definitely, I mean, a Palm Beach wife is all about money because
Mm-hmm.
the way Samuel dies in the beginning of this, my main character, Faith, in that novel, the husband the money's gone in the first.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at what we call in screenwriting the inciting incident, what drives the whole story forward. And in this case, it has, again, no spoiler, but it has a lot to do with money too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so let's see. It's a mystery and a page turner, which are always my go-tos during the summer. Actually, all year I love to alternate with a mystery when I'm reading my books. So there's a surprise ending, which of course we're not going to talk about. What your fiction promises the reader, is that, did you know all along how this novel would end? You've already talked about this, but I guess, did you have the surprise ending in mind, or did the way you crafted it, just happen later?
The surprise ending, I'm really glad you brought that up. So all of my novels have surprise endings, and reviewers seem to comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
That is really reflective of my nonfiction, because as I said before, we're raised to be good girls and pleasers. We're told that if we do the right thing, we'll get the right result. But
Mm-hmm.
there are so many curveballs thrown to women. And even in Palm Beach, what is survival for Maribelle after the truth is out about Samuel? And what will happen to her? And how could it be that one morning she woke up and her entire life changed? And so I leave the reader hanging with Between the Tides and my 3 Palm Beach novels and the
Mm-hmm.
novel I'm writing, because that's how it is for us in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Really don't know how we'll have to save ourselves, who will save us. I hope it can be that we can save ourselves, but how
Yeah.
do we navigate a path?
Yeah, very true. I just want to invite our viewers, if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat and we can ask Susannah to answer your questions. So just put it in the chat and I'll read them out. I'm curious where you came up with the name Maribelle. It's a really pretty name, but it's a little unusual for a character.
It's researched. It goes right back to your
Oh,
question about research. It's an old Southern name. It
uh-huh.
was originally French in a different, iteration.
Yeah.
And I researched all the names in this book to reflect the part of Florida that the family is originally from.
Mm.
And the book was sold, it was called A Palm Beach Shadow, and it came after A Palm Beach Wife and A Palm Beach Scandal,
Uh-huh.
Palm Beach Shadow. And then my new publisher, we had this whole Zoom meeting and with my agent and marketing people, and we talked about if I should have a different jacket, and this jacket is much more mysterious than, say,
Yeah.
the style of A Palm Beach Wife or Palm Beach Scandal. And we
Right.
decided to go with this because it was really something that it tells us about the book. And I like Maribel Shadow. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people are saying to me on the book tour, people keep saying, why didn't you call it A Palm Beach Shadow? So
Uh-huh.
who knows what you're in marketing in a way, being in a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who knows what's right, but I do love the name.
Yeah. I mean, as a bookseller, I really like the name too. And I think, there's certain things you get out of having, the sequence of the name following through the Palm Beach, this, the Palm Beach, that. But I think too, setting this apart might bring more readers in. So, and then
That was
they'll,
my thought. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And yet people who know branding
right,
say should have kept a Palm Beach
right.
Shadow.
I
And
know. It's interesting.
it
Yeah.
was a big decision. And, this is where I'm at. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, what are a few of your favorite books? I'm just curious, like what's on your nightstand right now? Do you read novels when you're writing nonfiction and nonfiction when you're writing a novel, or do you stay away from the kind of novels that you write, that sort of thing?
I try to read everything.
Uh,
It really matters to me that I know what's being written, that I get to support other writers, that I think it's so important that on this book tour, I've done a lot of sort of panels and in conversations with other women writers, and it's been such a treat.
mm-hmm,
We really need to support each other. So I
mm-hmm,
I read whoever is going to be like on the panel with me or interviewing me, or if I'm interviewing
right.
her, and I take that seriously. Right now, I'm reading Ellen Hildebrand's new book.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just started it. And I also bought Jonathan Haidt's book, the nonfiction study on
Mhm.
anxiety and our,
Okay. Yeah.
because I think that's important and I really like his work. So I read usually two books at once.
Okay. Yeah.
And I always love to read. I know some writers say, I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to be influenced.
Right.
I don't feel that that's an issue.
Okay. Yeah.
And I love the classics like Edith Wharton.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure. Well, that brings up a question from someone. Who were your inspirations when you were first becoming a writer?
Oh, that's such a good question. I always read Henry James.
Oh.
I always just interest, right?
Uh-huh.
And then I I said Edith Wharton, but I also loved Kate Chopin, The
Mm-hmm.
Awakening. I found that a haunting novel, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I love there's one Stephen King book that I read years ago and I couldn't put it down. It's called Lisey's Story. I think it was actually a series in the last few years.
Uh-huh.
I thought I thought he did a great job. And then every year or two, I reread Buddenbrooks by Thomas Mann, because I can't believe he was 27 when he wrote it. It is
Interesting.
just so beautifully done.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Wow. Um, there's a novel. Have you heard of The Bear?
Yeah,
Um, and that's it. I bring that up because it's about two sisters, a very interesting, complicated relationship between two sisters.
I have heard of it. Okay, just
Yeah, you might be interested in that one.
I
Yeah.
like.
So what's next for you? You said you're writing a nonfiction, perhaps your book's going to
And
be turned
finishing up
into.
a nonfiction study that has really mattered to me for these last few years. And I've interviewed hundreds of women for the book. So I'm really
Uh-huh.
excited.
Yeah, great. So I was hoping that you would read a couple pages, if you would. I personally love to hear an author read in their own voice because it gives you a sense of kind of what the tone is about a book. So I was hoping you could read a little bit for us.
Okay. So I will read page 16 and 17. This is right after the news has come to Maribel and they're in her beautiful Palm Beach home. In
Mhm.
Palm Beach, where your house is located, it's like a whole thing. And so her sisters are with her, and Caroline is married to a man named Travis. And so they're there, and I'll just start here, okay? They stood in Maribel's empty, pale, formal living room. Caroline was unable to grasp the sight of her husband in some weird change in charge mode. This had to be an elaborate hoax. He was standing in the corner, weathered and weary like his father and cousins who still lived in Kesgrave. That's my fictive town in the Panhandle, sorry. When they were kids, they went hunting for geese. His younger cousin, Arnie, had shot 2 toes off one Saturday morning. Behind him, the rain sliced at the French doors to the garden. Travis, what's going on? Already Caroline felt covered in a film of dread. Travis, tell us, Raleigh whispered, visibly anxious. What happened? Where's Maribel? Why aren't we talking to her? Raleigh walked nearer to the windows, twisting her hands. She'll be here. Caroline tried to be matter of fact. As Travis was about to start, Maribel came in from the library toward Raleigh. Although she was always agile, she was dragging, weighed down, her head tucked in, her work clothes and hair looked rumpled. Maribel sucked in the air. It's Samuel. There's been an accident, Travis said, on the Intracoastal. Samuel drowned. I don't believe you. Raleigh looked at him as if he were to blame. It must have been someone else. I'm sorry. There was a search and a rescue operation that didn't last very long. They found his body. He was thrown off the Vertigo out onto the waterway, the wind. He might have been speeding. Although Travis was not up close, Caroline knew his eyes were bluish, red around the rims. How they got in scary or sad times. Raleigh began to cry. Caroline reached out for both her sister's wrists. Didn't he have on a life vest? On that personal flotation device? What's it called? The PFD, she asked. He might have hit a sandbar, Travis said, or submerged rocks. We'll learn. We'll find out from the Coast Guard. Caroline turned to Maribel. I'm so sorry. Oh my God. I know. I think Samuel will come in tonight, won't he? He'll toss his keys in the tray by the front door. This is some joke, some mind game. Yeah, Raleigh said. That works.
Wow. It definitely makes me want to finish the story. So can't wait to.
Yeah, well, that's the point, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what happened.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was delightful. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
And I
And
thank you for taking the time and for inviting me to your wonderful bookstore.
anytime, well, hopefully your next one we'll get to see you live out here on the West
That would be
Coast.
great.
Yeah, and I want to thank all of you who've been watching. We really appreciate your support. And if you're interested in purchasing the book, you can purchase them through our website or give us a call, or if you're local, please come in and see us. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Uh-huh.